everybody. How are you doing today? Hope everyone is well. I know lots of people are having some very chilly weather. We're supposed to actually have a freeze tonight here in Tennessee as well. And then it's going to be 70 tomorrow and 80 the rest of the week and weekend. So yay, spring will finally be here, I think. So anyway, we're going to get rolling here. I may run a few minutes over today, so hang with me. I got lots of stuff to share with you. So for our first project, first I'm going to show you one we did a while ago. I think I did this one last August. I'm going to open up this image, and you've seen it in some of the ads for the event. So this was one we did in the other webinar when I started touching on using type. And you can, apply the type directly to your image or card. We're going to be creating some cards today. I'm going to show you how to set up a layout for that. But a lot of times I want to set up the words not on a card so that I can use them in a lot of different places. So I'm going to leave this one open because we're going to come back to this later. So I'm going to close that. So to start with our project, we're going to start with a new blank file. So I'm going to go File, New. And for this one, I'm going to do about a 12 by 15. So I like to work large as always, because it's always better to reduce things later on than make them bigger. Although type does not have pixels, so you can enlarge type without losing resolution. We're going to keep our 300 DPI, RGB color, 8-bit is fine for what we're doing. And for this, we want a transparent background. And then we're going to say create. So when I'm working on things like this, I find this checkerboard grid really hard on my eyes. So I'm going to add a second blank layer, just clicking on this plus sign here. And I'm going to make this back layer white. So I'm going to hit my D to set to the default black and white, and then the X will flip it. And then I'm just going to do an Alt backspace, which would be Option Delete on a Mac, just to make that layer white. And then I'm going to go back up here. It's much easier for me to see. That checkerboard annoys me. So now we're going to choose our type tool. And that's over here. And then we're going to pick our font. And for this one, I'm going to use one called BP Black and White Font. I don't remember where I got this one. I've had it for a really long time, but I tried looking it up and I cannot find it as a freebie anywhere. But in the notes, I did put a link. You can buy it on myfonts.com for 20 bucks. And I use this one a lot, but you can use any font you want to do these projects. This happens to be the one that I'm using. But if you want the exact font, that would be the one. And it's this one down here, this BP Black and White. And I'm going to set my point size to 200. So when you click this drop down, you only have these preset points, but you can click in this box and make it any size you want in here. So I'm going to click 200. And then I'm going to make my type black for now. So I'm just going to type 0. And we're going to change this later, but it's just easy to work with black when you get started, I find. And then I'm going to click on my canvas somewhere about in the middle. Would be here, doesn't have to be exactly in the middle, and click once to activate my type tool. Yes, it looks like it's huge, but it's really not that big. At least it shouldn't be. So I'm going to start today by doing Merry Christmas. Even though we just had Easter, I'm going to type, ooh, what is that so big? All right, so some of the fonts, when you're typing, they look like super, super fat. But once I kind of click that layer and it will commit that type, or you can click the check mark up top, you'll see that's the actual size of the lettering. And then to move it down, obviously it's too big, you can either double click in here to highlight it, keep your cursor off of the type until you see that move tool, and just click and drag. or you can use the move tool and you'll get the handles, and you would click somewhere on the actual letter and then you can drag it there. So either way, both of them do the same thing. So now I want to type my next word, and I am using the same font, but I want to make sure that this second word is on a separate layer. So before I click to start, I'm going to hold the Shift key and click, and that's going to automatically add another layer. This is really important if you're changing typefaces. And Pat Reck, who I know is online today, one time I was having a really hard time trying to get it to change the words and not change the old word. And she was the one who gave me the tip. If you hold the Shift key, but when you click, it will make a new layer. So thanks again, Pat, because I use that one all the time. So now I'm going to type Christmas. And again, we can just hit our check mark. And now we have our other word. So now comes the fun part. We can start playing around. But before I start moving these, I notice that it's remembering settings probably from something else I did, because these letters are way too close. See how the tails like are not lined up here? So this is an important thing when you're working with type, to get everything the way it should be. So I'm going to highlight my layer Mary. We're going to start with that one. And there's a couple ways to do this. So I'm actually jumping ahead and then we're going to come back because this one is off so much here. So to adjust our letters spacing, that's called kerning in typesetting. I used to be a typesetter, so I've mentioned that before. So I am, familiar with a lot of these little techniques. So it was a lot harder on typesetting equipment than it is on the computer. So to open up the panel to make adjustments, I have mine docked over here like I do with a lot of my panels. But you would just go up to Window and click on Character. And this gives us our controls that will, you can see we're at 200 point. There are some ways you can do it automatically, and we're going to try that first, and then we can change spacing, but I see it's already set to -50 from something else I did, so that's why it probably looks so weird. So I'm going to double click this layer to highlight all of the letters because they're all off a little bit. And let's set this back to 0 and see where we're at. Okay, so now it's a little too far the other way. So this is, kind of the perfectionist in me trying to get this right. So I'm going to go with 25 because 50 was too close the other way. And that looks good. So now our letters are lined up properly. So I'm going to do the same thing to this word. We're going to highlight this one, and we know that 25 will work. And there we go. So now our letters are the way they should be. So I'm going to go back to the notes, and I'm going to use red for this type. So I'm going to close this panel down. So I'm going to start with it. You could start with either one, but I'm going to click here, click on my type color, and the color I want is AB0E07. Nice Christmassy red. And then we can click the other layer and do the same thing. AB0E07. And okay, so now we have our red type. And now we're going to move our type into position because I don't want these letters. This just happened to be where they fell, but I like to make my letters kind of work together, my words. So I'm going to click my move tool. And I'm going to move Christmas. And this is where the kind of type nerd in me comes in. I wanted the curve of this C to be kind of centered under the spacing in the M. And I like the way that the curves are working together here. Now, sometimes you can say like there's a little more space here than there. If you want to get really picky, sometimes when you're sliding it like this, you can't always get it exact. So if you want to move something with the move tool one pixel at a time. You can use the arrow keys on your keyboard and you can see it's just one little pixel at a time. And you can get things exactly where you want them. So that's a cool little trick. That says, could you have highlighted both layers and changed the color together? I think so. Let me see. If we highlight these, let's try. Then you would have to go to your foreground color picker. You could do it, it would just have to be a different way. So let's just pick a lighter color. Say okay. And then you would have to do the Shift Alt backspace. No, it won't let me do that together. So I guess, no, we can't do that. Not that I know of, unless there's another way that somebody else knows of. But it won't let me do them both at the same time. And I think partly because they are not layers with pixels, maybe that has something to do with it, because these are vector layers, not pixelated. So anyway, so we have our letters in position. And now I want to add some layer styles to make my letters pop. I like to do some embossing and a little bit of a drop shadow. So we're going to start with this layer, and I'm just going to double click in a blank area of the layer. You don't want to click on the word or in the type. You want to click over here in the blank area, and that will open up your layer style box. And from here, I'm going to start with bevel and emboss. So if you click the check box here, make sure you highlight that row to get the proper controls in here. All right, so I'm going to do, and this may have remembered what I've done before, but maybe not. Emboss, smooth, those are kind of my standard. And then the depth will vary, and 180 is what I want, will vary depending on how big your letters are. And again, it's like anything, it's trial and error, playing around. I always do direction up. The size, I'm going to move it farther. You can see how it's curving the layers, you know, as I move that slider. So I'm going to do, we have 13 in the notes, but maybe we'll go a little bit more. And then I sometimes soften it a little so it's not a hard edge, and you can kind of get an idea of the effect over here on the right. And that doesn't have it's not going to be super noticeable, but it's kind of softening the lightness in the shadows there. And then under the angle for shading, I do 135, same as I like to do for my drop shadow, to give it that upper left to lower right look. And then that actually gave it a little bit of a shadow even without the drop shadow. So I'm going to, let's bring these back, because I'd rather add a regular drop shadow. Well, we need some of that to create our effect. All right, so we'll leave it about there. But I'm going to also click on drop shadow, and I'm going to go to the blend mode is multiply, 36%, my 135 angle. And then these three sliders will control how far it is away and how sharp it is. And these are the settings I use, but you could see by moving it a little bit, you can change that. And the size. So we want to keep that fairly low. So I'm going to go back to the settings I have in my notes, 33, 14, and 49. And then we'll say okay. Now these you can copy to the other layer. So I'm just going to right click next to where these are showing and say copy layer style. Click on our other layer in the blank area, right click, and paste layer style. And so that way they're exactly the same and you don't have to do the settings again. And then you would take a look and see if you need to tweak any of the settings, you know, move anything else around. And now we're going to save this first, and then I'm going to show you something else we're going to do with it. Let's see, can you make the drop shadow slightly reddish black? Yes, if you go into the settings on drop shadow, it defaults to black, but you could pick any color you want. Sometimes if I know I'm doing something like directly on an image and it's a dark colored image, I might use white for my drop shadow, but you can choose any color you want, and then the opacity will, you know, change how much that stands out. So for this one, we're keeping it, you know, fairly light. Do you ever change the contour of the drop shadow? Sometimes, again, depending on, you know, what it is and how I'm using it. Sometimes I won't do a drop shadow and I might do an outer glow, which will kind of change the color all the way around something more than just in the one direction. But most of the time I like the 135, but there are times, you know, when you need to change it. So you can definitely do that. Good questions, thank you. So before we save this, now we want to get rid of this white layer because we want this to be saved on a transparent background. And first, as always, you want to save it as a TIFF file so you keep your layers, right? So we would do File, Save As, save it as our TIFF file. And then I would save it to whatever folder I wanted. And then to save it as a usable file to bring in over an image, you want everything to be on a single layer, but we don't want to save it as a JPEG because a JPEG is going to turn this background white. We want to keep that transparency. So if you wanted to merge the layers first, you're just going to go Layer. You don't want to flatten because, again, that will turn it white. You want to do Merge Visible. And that's going to combine everything, but you can no longer make changes once you've done this. So that's why you always want to be sure to save that TIFF file. And then from here, you're going to go File, Save As, and save it as a PNG. And that's going to maintain that transparency for you. You can also save it as a TIFF, but I prefer the PNG. PNG is kind of the comparable to a JPEG file, but keeping that transparency. Okay. So I'm going to undo this last step, and I'm going to show you some alternative letters that some fonts come with. So I'm going to highlight both of these so I can just move this over a little. Do you have to do the merge? No, you can just save it as a PNG. It will merge it automatically, just like a JPEG does. But if you wanted to merge it, I just wanted to point out not to use the flattening command. I believe so. Yes, it should be because you don't have all the layers in it. So it'll be more like saving a JPEG file. So some letters come with, especially script fonts, tend to come with what they call glyphs or alternative letters. So in this case, I wanted to see if there was another Y that might have a swirlier tail on it. So the way you look for these is, again, I have mine docked. I have some of the things I use all the time docked on my panel. We would just go to Window and Glyphs. And that will open this panel. The one thing you have to make sure of is, and the first time you're using it, if you just like restarted Photoshop, it will usually default to the font you're on. But like if I change fonts, it's not going to automatically change it here. You may have to choose that font from your font list again. So just make sure you're on the right font or it won't work. So when you first open this up, and I've got these kind of large just so you can see what's in here. So we should be able to make this bigger. So initially you're going to see the regular alphabet, the letters. You know, this is the standard actually letters. And then you get down past the alternate characters. These are the actual glyphs with the different accents for different languages. But then if you keep on going, you get to, you can see there are different versions of certain letters. So I'm going to go down to the Y. and they are sometimes hidden. It's just weird the way these boxes fit sometimes. But you can see as I hover over it, there's a GID number there. And it's telling me that's the small letter Y. If you look at the last line when it pops up. Come on. Sometimes, there you go, where it says name, Latin, small letter Y. So the reason I have that moved over there, so I can kind of see what these are going to do, but I did write down the number that I used was 462, which is this one. So when I actually, first I have to come back over here to my Mary and highlight, I do my type tool, I'm going to highlight that letter. And then I'm going to go over to that Y. And when I click it, double click it, you can see that it changed that tail. And if I double click some of the others, let's see if I can move this over. You can see some actually go off the page. They're really long. I would have to make my canvas bigger, but I don't want something that far away from my word. I kind of liked this one that was more part of the word. So I'm going to close that. So now if I click off of there, you'll see the actual size of that. And I thought that was kind of cool. It came behind the T and curled right into the center of the C. So that's another way that you can kind of jazz up your lettering a little bit. And again, not every font has those, but a lot of times the script fonts definitely tend to do that. So now let's say we wanted to try a different typeface. We want to still say Merry Christmas, but we want to do something different. So if we go click on our word Merry, and we're going to go a totally different direction with these. I'm not going to use a script. I'm going to use a block kind of type. And this one is called Chocolate Box. And I'm going to use this one. And this one you can get for free. It's on a site called Dafont, DAFONT.com, and it's the chocolate box font. Judy, when I clicked it, you can see how these letters are looking a little fat. That's just the way they are when they're highlighted. But once you accept that type, it kind of goes back to that. So I didn't have to do anything other than accept that change. And then we're going to choose this font and choose the same thing. I'm going to go to my favorites because it'll give me a shorter list. And I know this one is in there because I do like this one. And we'll accept that. And now we can play around with the sizes here a little. So I'm going to grab that move tool and move my word Mary up a little bit. And let's make sure this is all the way on the canvas. You don't need a lot of empty space on the sides, but I might want a little bit more because of the drop shadows. So if you need to change your canvas, you just go to your image, canvas size, and I'm just going to make my width like 17. We'll add an inch. And if you want to, you can crop these a little once you're done before you save them. I often do that, but make sure you leave enough room that you don't clip any of your drop shadows or anything. So I'm going to move this one up and line up the M in the beginning of the H. Now, if you look over here between the T and the M, that spacing is much bigger than anything else. So this is one where we're going to kern those letters here. So if I highlight, click on my type tool, highlight the M because that's the letter that I'm moving to the left. And we'll go back to our character panel. This one, we're going to go into this box where it says VA, where we did before. And I'm going to move this one to -50. And that's why it was remembering that before. So you can see how it closed it up. Click on there. And sometimes it takes a few, whoops, didn't do it. Let's try that again. That's weird. It's there, and then it's not there. All right, let's click on the font. Well, that's bizarre. Things are always so weird. And sometimes changing from metrics to optical will also make a difference. When you see it tightened all of the letters a little, I think they're a little too tight. So I'm going to stick with metrics. All right, so let's try that again. It moved it and then it didn't move it. Minus 50. Let's try highlighting both letters, see if that matters. Sometimes. There we go. Well, that worked. So it moved it up. I'd probably go even a little bit more. Let's try minus 75. And again, you could even change those numbers if you need to by just typing in there. Yeah, it's better. Pat, is there a shortcut to reset a font to its original attributes? I would probably just come in here and click on metrics and then just pick 0, highlight everything and just set it to 0. I don't know of any other quick shortcut to do that. That's a good question though, but I haven't found a shortcut for that. You would think they would reset to their own, but it tends to remember what you did before. I think Dave's looking it up over there. All right, so let's see. Okay, sorry, I'm just checking questions. So whenever you change a font, the style stays as you originally picked. Yes, it didn't change anything other than the actual font. So now I'm going to click on my Mary. I'm going to go back to my move tool. I'm going to remove this since it shifted because of our change over here. I'm going to put that together. So it still has all those, because we haven't created a new file, it still has those same, the bevel and emboss and drop shadow, but I'm going to make a couple changes to that because it's a little heavier font. So we're going to re-click to open this panel again. And I'm going to go back to my bevel and emboss. And this time I'm going to go to inner bevel, which is the one I tend to use more. Leave it on smooth. I'm going to make the depth much bigger because it's a heavier font. So you can see from where it was and where we're going that it's got much more like highlights and shadows in it. Leave the direction at up. Size, I'm going to make 32. And soften, we'll make 8. And that soften is the line kind of between the highlights and shadows. I'm going to leave our angle in shadow mode. I lowered that, yeah, 32 to 40. And that's the shadowed side of that. And I'm going to leave our drop shadow as is. If you wanted it to be a little bigger, you could do that as well. And this is, again, another reason why I like the white layer in the background, because it's easier to see the drop shadow. So again, we could put that. Control plus. Hang on one second here. I'm going to make this layer white again so I can see my drop shadow. Come back in here. Go to my drop shadow. And then we can move that a little bit. And change our opacity if you want. And say okay. And then again, we can right click here, copy our layer style, click the other layer, right click, and paste it. So you don't have to do it twice. Then let's see, now the A is too close to the M. Yep, so you can, good catch. And that's probably because I just did that optical thing. So we can, let's highlight our A, go back here, and let's set that to, let's try -10. And actually, I don't mind it touching because that was something we used to look to do when we were doing headline type back in the day. But you might want to, then you could add letters if you need to. Oh, actually moved the wrong one. Oh, because I'm going the other direction. Well, poo. Let's go back to our, what were we on? Minus 25. Let's do the S. And, so that means we want to do the M. I always end up playing around with this because I get all messed up. Let's go back to 10. Let's see how that looks. That's better. So there we go. All right. Yeah, it's touchy sometimes. You have to just pay to get pay attention to, and play around with it a little to get it tweaked the way you want. Okay, so that's that. And then the other thing I sometimes like to do is to add little decorative things. So I'm going to bring in, I'll open this up. I found this online. This was a new site I came across. It's called cliparting.com. I'll type it in here, C-L-I-P-A-R-T. And it's a free site. And you just type in what you want to search for, and a whole bunch of stuff came out. So it was kind of cool. So I'm going to grab my move tool, and we're going to bring this in just like we would if it was a texture. So I'm going to grab this layer, pull down, grab the artwork, and pull it over. And we can close that. And then I'm going to rotate this. And I want to put it down here. I'm going to let it sit on the A. And then, again, I want to tweak it a little. If you want to move it up or down or over, you can do it like that. Move it up a little, touching the S a little bit. That's okay. And then you can do that. And then if you wanted to, you can also add a drop shadow to this because it's already, we wouldn't really need to do the embossing, but you could definitely come in and just add a simple drop shadow. I would make it smaller. And you can play around. You want it to be similar to the other, but it doesn't have to be quite exact. And there you have it. So then I would delete that white layer again. And you could crop it if you want. I would probably bring down like that. Like that. And then save it as your TIFF file. So again, you could come in, you may want to put different artwork there. And then you can also use the same layer to create other words from. So then, all right, so I'm going to close this one because we're definitely going to run past 5 o'clock. So this one I created, like I said, on this card. Now say I wanted to put this happy birthday somewhere else, and I don't want to have to recreate it because I really like the way this one looks. I'm going to highlight all the layers except those 2 word layers. So we're going to highlight all of these and hit delete. Now we have our words on a transparent background. So we can just, again, crop it if you want. Kind of bring it in like that. And let's say instead of purple outlines, I want something else. So double click on one of the layers. I did a stroke here. Instead of purple, let's make it blue. Pick a color. And if you want the opacity higher, you could bring it all the way up. And that's 8 point, which I thought worked well with that type. Now you notice the position, if you choose center, that means half of the stroke is on the actual type and half of it is outside of it. So if we went with inside, it would make your type look narrower, and it doesn't work with something like that because it gets rid of all of the white. And if you want all of it on the outside, it would make your type look fatter. So that's something to play with too, when depending on on the typeface as to where that stroke will work best. Say okay. Copy the layer style and paste the layer style. And then we would save that. And now you could bring it over onto another photo to use for a grading. So let's see. Cliparting.com is not free. It's free for 30 days. Oh, I didn't see that part, John. Interesting. Well, there are plenty of free clip art sites out there, so check around, but I did not see that. I didn't see anything pop up on that. And Judy says, could you change the color of the berries if I wanted it closer to the Merry Christmas red? You could. That would be a little more involved because they're not a solid color. But you could, what I would probably do is make a selection of those, put the berries on a separate layer, and then use like a hue and saturation adjustment layer and clip it just to those. I don't have time to get into that right now, but I know I've done that a few times in other projects. And that's something we can cover in the future. Could you make one of your watercolor Holly I painted into clip art? Absolutely. Just scan it, bring it in. You would select it and then put it on a clear background. Delete any other background color so it's on a transparent layer. Absolutely. That would be great to use your own artwork. Okay, so next thing that's pretty cool that I found online. Go over here to the site, and another cool way to create some word art, it's https://inkpx.com. This is free. And you can create different, if you click on browse all under word art, these are some standard setups that they have, but you could choose any one you really want and change it. So I started with this black gold. So I'm going to just double click this. And then we can make all kinds of changes here. So there's 3 tabs here: text, style, and background. So the text, you can change this to happy birthday if you want, or whatever you want it to say. Choose a font. You cannot choose from your own fonts. Theirs are a little more limited. And when I first came in here, I'm like, oh, there's only these few. But if you click once in this search box, it will open, and just type the letter A. It opens up a whole huge list of fonts, probably more than I even have in my computer, which is a lot. So I chose Dancing Script. So let's go down here real quick. Oops. All right, let's go up here and I'll just type it in. Let's see. Script, regular. So I'm going to change it to that font. And then you can change, this is the point size of it. You can make it as big as you want. I think I went with like 200. I like to work large when I do these. And then if you want to break it on 2 lines, which I'm going to show you how to do in Photoshop, I'm going to do it just on 1 line here, but you can do 2 lines here as well. And then go to letter spacing if you needed to space it out a little bit more. And let's go to style. So here's where you can change the colors. So you can choose a different gradient for the center. You can choose any of these, and you can change the colors even by just clicking in here and change the color to whatever you want it to be. You can also do just a solid color. Look here. Well, let's do green just because. And then you can go to the background, or let's see, style, gradient pattern. Oh, that was the fill. And then this has multiple strokes around it. So you could click there and go, since we have green, let's choose a blue. And again, it could be a gradient or just a color. And then choose the other outline, which is the black line. And we could choose something else. And you can change the width of them. They can be narrower, fatter. And it also already has a drop shadow. You can change that. Same kind of settings, distance, angle. blur. And then you just download this PNG because we want that transparent background. And it's going to, they just say if you want to donate, buy them a coffee, but you don't have to if you want to share it. But there is no fee that has to be paid. And then I'm just going to open that and it should open right to Photoshop. So if we wanted to put this on 2 lines, the easiest way to do this is I'm going to use my rectangular selection tool. And let's see if I can get this in the middle here. I think I caught it. And just do a Control J, and that's going to put that word on a separate line. So we can come back to the first one. I'm just going to grab the eraser tool and erase birthday from that line. And so now we got happy and birthday. So now you would need to change our canvas size to make it taller so we can move our words around. I know I'm going kind of quick, so you might have to catch the replay. I'm trying to cover a lot and I want to get to the templates. And again, you could play around with your spacing. And I'm still erasing a little, so you go back and grab that. And that's it. I mean, it's similar to the other, but it's a really quick way. If you don't want to make all the decisions yourself, you can, you know, use a site like that and kind of do something really cool. And then I brought it into, I'll show you a finished image. I popped one on top of this image, and we're going to make a card with this image next. Alrighty, so that's that really quick. Is your cursor highlight is a piece of software. Do I have my cursor on still highlighted? I didn't think I did, but I might have. Cursor. Oh. I'm not sure what the question was, so I missed something here.
She asked about why she can't play on hers because it's a software add-on. It's not something that doesn't come with it.
Okay. Anyway, so this is our finished card. So before we add that to anything, and I'll open a JPEG one to actually do this. So let's close these. I'm not going to save that. So now we're going to create a template. And the reason we're going to do it as a template that you can reuse over and over and over. Anytime you wanted to make cards, if you wanted to have a card printed somewhere, you know, at a regular print shop or something like that. So we're going to go to our file, new, and I'm going to make a 5x7 card. So that means my layout, because it's got a front and a back, is going to be 7 inches wide, but it's going to be 10 inches tall. Double that 5 inch. All right, we're going to do a horizontal card to start with. So 7 inches wide, double your height, 8-bit RGB, and this time we want our background white. We'll say okay. So now a cool thing that, I don't know, I found this a long time ago, and I'm not sure how I figured this out, but I think I probably saw it somewhere. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention, when you're setting this one up, your new file, sorry, you may or may not want RGB. If you're printing this at a typical like regular print shop or like an online printer, before you start your card, make sure you know what format they want. If you're going with a traditional printer, you may very well need CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, which is traditional 4-color printing. So that's actually what I want for this card, because if I were sending this out, I know that's what I'm going to need with the company that I've used in the past. Okay, so we can get rid of that first one. So now we're on our CMYK. And because I know that this is 2 pieces, but I don't want to draw a line where the middle is, but I want kind of a guideline. If you put your cursor up here on the ruler, and if your ruler is not showing, go to Window and turn on your rulers, which are under Tools. No, I take that back. I hate when I'm hurrying. Let me try reading my notes. I'm going to edit preferences. And that's where you will change. You want them to be, if you go to units, you want to be on inches. Okay, so you want to make sure you're in inches, unless you're in another country and you tend to use metric, then you want that. And then you want to go to view and rulers right here. So it's not window, it's under view. So you want to make sure your rulers are on. Okay, so I'm going to put my cursor up here on a ruler, click and just drag my mouse down, and you'll see this line show up. And I'm going to put it at the 5 inches, which is my middle. When I let go, it turns into this blue rule. This does not show up on your final project. This is only on the Photoshop screen. So when I save this, that rule will not be there. This is just a guideline for you to work with. So if you're doing a document that has columns, you're setting up like a newsletter or something, this is a great way to be able to see what you're actually doing. So I'm going to zoom in on just the front part of this card so you can see. I'm going to move this up. So now here's the front of my card. So the first thing I want to do is create a clipping mask where I want my photo to go. So we have a 5x7 card, and I'm going to use the shape tool to do this. The shape tool is usually at the bottom of your toolbar, and it may be hidden. If you hit these 3 little dots here, you'll see that there is a whole bunch of other tools. So I'm going to choose the rectangle tool. And this is where the rulers come into play, and you want it to be big enough that you can see. So I want to have a 1/2 inch border below this guideline from each side and from the bottom. So I know my width is 7, so I'm going to start at a 1/2 inch here. So you can see if you look up here where my cursor is going, and a 1/2 inch down. So I'm at a 1/2 inch and 5.5 inches. Click, and I'm going to drag that till you can see where it's at 6.5 on the right, and it's going to tell me it's perfectly centered. And then I'm going to come up so I have a 1/2 inch at the bottom. Okay. So from here, I don't really need this box. Well, I can use this box. We can do it either up top or here, same thing. So I want to change, right now it doesn't have a fill color. I'm going to make my fill black. And I'm going to turn off the outline, which is there. It doesn't really matter. You can leave that on. Either way, it's got a stroke. You can turn the stroke off and just leave the fill on. So then it's the exact size that you wanted. Okay. And if I click off of that layer, you'll see I now have a perfect square. Yeah, rectangle. And Dave corrected me, not a square. Okay, so that is our shape. Now, what I like to do on a card, and you don't have to do this, obviously, it's an option. I like to have a thin rule about 1/8 of an inch away from my picture. It just gives it a nice little border before we even bring in a picture, because remember, we're setting up a template and then we can use this over and over again. So I'm going to go back to that rectangle shape. This time I'm going to leave the fill off. I want my stroke to be 2 pixels. And you can either choose a color or you could choose black for now. And then what I like to do is change the color to match my image. So I'm going to choose black. It's on 2 pixels, just a straight line. And click off of there. So now we want to draw this line out from our, so before you start clicking, you want to make sure you're at the right starting point. Click and drag. And there we go. And then when you let go, now we've got our rule. Close that. Don't need that. So this is our rule. So I would change the title of this because it's really hard to see it on there, so that you know what to click on when you want to change the color layer later. Can't talk anymore. So that would be the front template for our card. Now on the back of the template, let's scroll up, I want to put my logo and town, my copyright information. So I am going to bring in my logo. If you don't have a logo, you could just use your name, or if you have a business name, however you do it. I'm going to drag it from my other screen to save time. Now, of course, I don't want it to be facing that direction. I want to turn this around because it's going to be at the bottom of my card. And that's about the size. I probably want maybe slightly smaller. And that pink line is telling me it's perfectly centered. Now I don't want to go, I'm going to put a line below this, and I want to leave room because I don't want to go closer than a ½ inch to the edge. You never want to go, unless you're doing a full bleed picture, which I'll talk about in a second. But when you're doing a card like this, you don't want things too close to the edge, because when they trim them after they're printed, it's not always a perfect science. So you want to make sure something's not going to get cut off. And if you've done business cards online or anything, you'll be familiar with that kind of safe space that you need to leave. So now I want to type, I'm going to say okay here. I'm going to select my type tool. I'm going to select, I like is Amaranth. This is one I don't know if this is a default font or not. I don't think so, but I don't remember where I got it, but I like this and I use it a lot. I want to do about 10-point type, and I'm going to flip this around later. So for now, I'm just going to line it up under here. I'm kind of centered, and obviously I don't want white. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to choose the blue right out of my logo. Say okay. Now typing the copyright symbol, there is a way to do it supposedly with a number code in Photoshop. I can never get that to work right, and I've looked that up and I've tried it. So what I do is I open a Word doc, and I'll bring one over here. Hang on one second. And I have like other Word things open, so hang on. I've got like too many screens going on over here. Trying to drag this. Okay. So if I open a Word doc and I can pick the same font or a different font. I know I can never get the code. I'll try it, but I'll show you the other way if you can't get it to work. I'll just come in here, type 10-point, and I'll do the insert symbol and just type my copyright. Copy that, right click, copy, and then just come in here, right click, and paste it without formatting. So let's try it the other way. A little space over. So it's Alt, hang on. Hold the Alt key, 0169. See, I never get it to do anything. Oh, let me do that first from the other letter. Let's try it on a different layer. Shift click. Alt 0169. There it is. This time it worked. I have tried this over and over and I've never been able to get it to work. So it's called me a liar. But that's two ways that you can get the copyright. So if you can't get the Alt symbol to work, that would be how you would do it. All right, so I'm going to re-highlight this layer. I don't want to click there. I want to click here because I want to type right after this. And I'm going to click 2022. Usually I put my name actually. And if you want to put your town, you can do that. You can put anything you want, but however you want to do it. And then I'm just going to take that layer and go to Edit, Transform, rotate 180.
So once you have to use
So now it's in the right position, the right direction, and I'm going to move it so it's centered. And there you have it. So now you have a template. So you want to save this as a TIFF file because you're going to use this over and over and over if you want to make a bunch of cards. So I already have it saved, but you would do a file save it as a TIFF. And now we can bring in a photo. So let me move some of the stuff over on my other screen. Use that. Okay, so let's bring in, so now when you bring in an image, you want it to be a JPEG or a flattened TIFF. You don't want to bring in something with layers, right? So I want it to be above this rectangle shape. So I'm dragging from my other screen, and you would bring it in. And then I'm going to size this as close as I can to this image. Now remember, your picture may not already be exactly proportioned to a 5x7. You can see if I match the height, I'm going to have to crop my width a little bit. So this is where having the shape makes it easier. So I'm going to let it crop from the left side. So I'm going to move this into position. And then we're going to clip our picture to that shape. So there's two ways of doing it. You can either do Control-Alt-G, which lately, and it didn't here, it's for some reason has not been working right. And I use this shortcut all the time. So the other way to do it is hold the Alt key and put your cursor between the two layers till you get that little arrow with the square and click. And that has now clipped that image to that shape. So it's perfectly sized. You can see it's what was over here is now hidden and kind of cropped out, right? And that would be a card that you could now save and send out for printing. And then if I wanted to change the picture, I'll just trash that layer. And then we could bring in our happy birthday image that we did before, which will probably be about the right shape, but it might have to be cropped a little. Yep, so this one, I'm going to have to decide if I want to crop the top or the bottom because my width is not going to be big enough. So I have to make my width match. So it's just like when you're choosing anything for, you know, making a print or whatever, you know, if you're printing a print for hanging, once you do the clipping, then it will size it to your shape. Alrighty. When you click on the block shape, there are tiny circles. That's if you wanted to resize that shape. That's just the way that particular shape tool works. Yes, they are registration marks. I never really lined up anything with those. I would just use the handles to resize. It's showing a curve there. Oh, okay. So if you were cropping something, that's what it's for. See how the handles are moving here? Oh, it's to make curved corners. That's what it's for. You can make curved edges with them. Yeah, there you go. Or you can bring them all the way out. Well, that's rather cool. That's rather neat. So there you go. That's what they're for. So that's something different. So I have, you know, created a template this way. And then what you would do is create a template for a vertical card. So the way we could do that easily is just, let's rotate this whole thing, image, rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise. And then just take your two layers here with your logo and the type. I'm going to clip them, use my move tool, rotate these that way, and then bring that down to the what would be the back of the card. And now you have a template for a vertical card. Phew, And it's 5:01. Wow, I actually made it. I didn't think I would. Let's see what else is in my notes. So that's our template. That is our bringing in the image. Have them there. Also in the notes, I have a page of font and brush resources with a whole bunch of websites of where you can get some free or very inexpensive products for fonts and brushes as well, but especially fonts for this case if you want to look for some cool ones. And there's, like I said, there's tons of places you can get free stuff. The notes are on sale. Let me bring up my slide. The notes are just $5, regular $7.50, on sale for the next week. And don't forget to join us in June for our next virtual creative conference. 2 days, 8 speakers, 13 sessions, still just $39 as long as you sign up before like mid-June. We have another great lineup. It's all on the website and the blog and newsletter. I did, dear.
You didn't say how much they were.
I did. I said they're just $5. He said, mention the price of the notes. I did do that. It's a bargain. It's a cup of coffee. And then you can get all the little tidbits and whatnot that I talked about. And I think we covered all of the questions, and hopefully this gives you some cool ideas. And it's a great way to create your own card. I mean, when I do my Christmas cards, I tend to do them like on Shutterfly or one of those kind of sites. But if you're doing cards and you want to do bulk printing and you want to be able to sell them, you don't want to do a company like Shutterfly because number one, it's too expensive. And number two, you'll have their logo on the back of the card, not yours. So, one of the sites I've used for several different things is Vistaprint. They tend to be pretty good. There's a lot of really good sites out there. So, and some of them you can do a test as well. Oh, I was going to show you a couple others I had set up. I never did get, oh, this is what I wanted to talk about too for the bleed. I do have one more thing. So if you have a picture and you want to print it fully off of the card, this is called a bleed on 3 sides. You're going to want to set your template differently, and that's where these guides come in, because you've got to leave at least 1/8 of an inch more for that trimming when they cut the cards. So you can see my, instead of being 10 inches, this is 10 1/4, and I've got that 1/8 inch all the way around for bleed, and then it's like 7 1/4 inches high. So when you're doing something for that kind of a layout, you have to, these guides are definitely helpful to get these placed. And this is just a JPEG version of it. But
There's a question about CMYK and RGB.
what word do you use for home printing, RGB or CMYK, and why? If you're printing it on a printer at home, most of the time you should be able to do RGB because you have lots of different ink colors. They usually have red, green, blue, and CMYK. But if you're doing commercial printing, where they're printing it on a 4-color printing press, they only use cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. That's 4-color process printing. And so you have to have your profile of your photo be in that same format. So if you're home printing, again, you can print, just regular RGB. But if you're using a commercial printer, you can always check with the printer. And if you're using an online one, they'll tell you exactly what they need and what format. And usually you'll have to flatten it and send it. Some will take a JPEG, some will take TIFFs. They'll also do PDFs. So there's lots of different formats and things that you can do. Some of the prints come out a lot darker on than on the computer screen. That's where you need to calibrate your monitor and your printer, but so that they're matching. I used to have that issue too years and years ago when I was printing for competitions in the camera club. The other thing I found, and this happens probably not so much with today's kind of monitors, but back then I was always having a problem with things coming out way too dark. And one day I just kind of was like leaning forward with my hand on my chin, and by looking lower on my monitor, I saw a difference in the color. I raised my monitor about 3 inches up by setting it on a box, and then I could see the actual color that the monitor should be. Yes, search for calibrating monitors. One of the good tools for it is by Spyder, Spyder. There's a couple of really good ones. That's the one I've been using for years. And it's like it's a process, but it's not difficult. So definitely, check for that. But you can start with Spyder, and that will give you an idea of what calibration is for your monitor. Alrighty, I think we've got it all covered. Any questions? Catch the replay. I'll have the video up by tomorrow morning sometime, probably by late morning. And grab the notes while they're on sale. And we will see you all again real soon. Thanks for being here, everybody. I much appreciate it greatly. Have a good evening. Take care.